I'll have to re-tag you as well. Oh, we're live. There we go. Very exciting. Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Female Leaders on Fire and our live show. And today I'm very, very excited because it's not just me chatting on and talking about Overwhelm, but I've got two amazing guests with me today that they're going to introduce themselves in a minute. And these are two brilliant women that I met through my coaching diploma that I just finished recently. So my ICF coaching diploma. And they are also focusing on leadership in a slightly different way and in their own style. So I thought it was a really good opportunity to get them on today. But say hello as you come on. Let me know that you're there and this is all working because this is still a little bit new to me. If you've got any questions as we go through, just feel free to ask them in the comments. Even if you're watching on replay, we can always catch up with them later. So ladies, would you like to start with introducing yourselves and who you are and what you do? So Becky, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, thank you for having me, Nick. Yeah, so I'm Becky, and through my business Quest for Rest, I'm on a mission to create the happiest leaders. And my passion is working with the future and emerging leaders and helping them forge their own path as they work up the ranks.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's so needed as well, isn't it? That those initial steps, rather than being who you feel you have to be, being yourself. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and instead of just watching those around you who maybe aren't always doing the best job,
yes,
so that they can, be, know, and do better than those others that they see.
Absolutely, brilliant. And Faye, do you want to introduce yourself, who you are and what you do?
I will do. Thanks, Nick. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Fay Blakey Coaching. I just go via my own name, which keeps it simple. But I work with business owners and leaders, and I help you to put in place those qualities, those traits, those behaviours that you need to be an absolute great leader. Because actually what you tend to find is that if you're a business owner or a leader, you've been really brilliant at a job, you've been promoted up, or you've set up your own business, but there's so much more that you might not know. So it's about developing you into that leadership role and making you feel comfortable so that you don't have those mindset things going on with you, and really being able to, explore your potential in that role.
I love it. I love it. Brilliant. So today we're going to be talking about our focus this week is talking all about overwhelm and how as women and female leaders we can get stuck in that hustle, that doing, that proving. And really we see a lot of women that tend to be promoted through performance. So we really get scared of the times maybe we don't feel like we're performing. Whereas we see men quite often get promoted through potential. So they kind of, what is their potential and the opportunity there? So I wanted to talk about overwhelm because I think it's such a huge thing. And I think the last year has just shown there's so much to feel overwhelmed about. And I think you can go easily from overwhelming to overthinking, kind of freeze and get stuck in your own head. And you can also go into overfunctioning, which I used to do in like doing mode. And so what do you kind of, when your clients are feeling overwhelmed, what do you kind of recognize first in them? What are the kind of symptoms that your clients might be feeling overwhelmed?
There's a couple of things that I'm going to pick up on, if I may. Yeah. One is that fast thinking. It's that really quick. I've got to be. I've got, and it's about
clicking.
Yeah, it's about slowing down, isn't it? It's about saying, right, hang on a minute, let's take a breath. We don't often do that, and certainly not as women. We're doing so much. We're thinking about what's for tea. We're thinking about our children. Yeah. We've been thinking about homeschooling. We're trying to run our business, or we're trying to do our jobs as well as all of that. And it's this constant living at a really fast pace. So it's about slowing down. But also, and I've written this down because I always get my levels wrong.
Oh, she's written notes.
I've only this one thing, but it's about thinking as well about those levels of competence that we have. And it's about, and quite often overwhelm comes in when we're at that, we know what we're doing, but we don't know what we're doing. So it's a sort of conscious incompetence that we have. Yeah. So those 4 levels of competence, I'll just run through in case anybody doesn't know them, but we've got unconscious incompetence at the bottom. So if we think about when we're learning to drive, we've never driven the car before. We don't know how to do it. We don't care. Somebody else will drive us. That's that unconscious incompetence level. But when we're learning to drive and we first sit behind that wheel, suddenly we're very conscious of what we don't know.
Yeah.
and we've got the steering wheel, we've got all the stick things coming out, we've got pedals, and that's when stick things and pedals. I know, I know the lingo.
The stick things. I love it.
But that's when we can feel really overwhelmed. So it's recognizing the level that we're at. So again, it's slowing down, but recognizing that level. And I think I see that a lot with my clients. So I think that's a really key point.
Yeah, brilliant. What about you, Becky? What do you tend to see in clients when they're feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah. I think the first sort of like sign of, are we dealing with overwhelm here, is when people talk about the low energy. Low energy and low mood are really greatly linked, I think, to being in that state of overwhelm. You've got to that point, haven't you, where there's just so much going on. You just can't do any more. And so those energy levels have just completely plummeted. And people telling you that they're struggling to sleep, lack of being able to sleep well is a real big one. And that they can't think clearly. People who have usually been able to process things really, really well are suddenly finding that they can't actually map out a day, or they can't plan out what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And I think those are those really early warning signs for me that someone might be in that state of overwhelm.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the analogy of if you look at your computer now and you look at how many tabs you've got open, and I'm thinking, oh, today's not too bad.
Not too many.
It's the same thing in your brain, isn't it? When you've got all those tabs open and the kind of plate for every single thing is spinning. And I was listening to Brené Brown talking about no, it wasn't actually, it was Glennon Doyle, and she was talking about overwhelm the other day, especially for women, and how self-care needs to come in, but almost the invisible tasks that we have. So, and again, I'm not saying every household is set up in the same way. I'm not kind of don't want to get into gender stereotypes, but if there's a birthday, your son or daughter's having a birthday, there needs to be, what are we doing? What are we buying? We having a party? Who's inviting, it's the kind of the invisible jobs that go with the kind of assumption that it needs to get done and it needs to be somewhere. So there's all that part of it, as well as we then want to have the career and we want to make the impact, plus all of that at home as well. How do you think we're kind of managing that at the moment, given the last 18 months or so?
Oh, the last 18 months has been difficult, right? I think I don't think there's any person or any situation who has gotten off lightly of the past 18 months, and I must admit, at first I felt really sorry for me, woe is me, and I quite enjoyed for a little while wallowing in that space, to be quite honest. It felt quite good to be like, woe is me, I've got 2 young children, and when it all kicked off, they were 5 and 2. The one who had just started then her first year of primary school, and I'd set up my business. My business started last October, so I was only a few months into my business, and all these things that I'd wanted to do, and then lockdown hit, and it was woe is me. Here I am with these young children. I've got to homeschool, and I'm trying to build a business and do my training as well. And it was, even when you know all the things, and I talk about this with Fay a lot, because this is one of my favorite phrases, that you can know all the things. So we can know all these things about how to deal with overwhelm, but knowing and doing, they're completely different things. Yeah. And so I was very lost in that. Well, I know all the things, but I'm not actually doing them. And very much sort of kept my, and it was a conscious, or was it an unconscious or an unconscious decision, really, to keep myself in that state of feeling overwhelmed by it all. So even us sat here as coaches, we know all the things, doing all the things, it's a different matter. And the last 18 months, I think, has really been an eye-opener around that for me.
Yeah, hugely. What about you, Fay?
Well, it's funny because when I learned about what we were going to talk about today, I was thinking, I don't get overwhelmed. But actually I do. And I do. And
perfect guess. You get overwhelmed.
I don't get overwhelmed, but actually I do. And I can get overwhelmed quite easily, actually. I can get overwhelmed by somebody saying to me, shall we meet up? Or what are we doing at the weekend? And I'll go, And I'll go into that sort of shock mode of I can't see you at the weekend, I've got too much to do kind of mode. So I have to then work out in my head, I have to do exactly what I said. I have to slow down and think, right, I've got a lot to do, but actually somebody wants to see me. You know, my family tend to get together a lot of the weekends so that the cousins can get together and play. So, but it's always going on. And we tend to work probably more to my sister's agenda because she's got 2 kids, whereas I've only got 1. So she's got more going on, parties and things.
Yeah.
So it's looking at that, and I'll feel, you know, that my time is impinged upon, and I don't like that, and that makes me feel overwhelmed. So again, it's that slowing down, and I need to think, right, I've got these things to do, but if I do that then, and that then, and that then, and that, planning it out, then that helps me immensely. So it's just that in the head planning, just sorting out my day, then I'm much better with it.
I think when I get overwhelmed, and I was probably one of those people that I wasn't actually hugely affected if you looked at my life externally, because I already work from home. I don't have children. But actually when it all started happening, I was completely overwhelmed by what was going on in the world and people's reactions. And then kind of Black Lives Matter started, and there was just all this compounded kind of collective trauma and emotions, and it just felt so much that I just, as an empath, I really had to work on kind of clearing the feelings. And I can get overwhelmed, I think, with stuff and things and commitments, but I can also get overwhelmed with kind of emotions and feelings as well. So a brilliant, super quick hack that I quite often go back to is I just take a blank sheet of paper and I just like mentally vomit onto the piece of paper. Like, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Like, and just keep writing. And it doesn't make sense. It looks so shit. It's all scrawly, but it's just the action, and that almost starts to close some of those tabs in my own mind. Or I'll put something in a diary date for later on. It's like, I don't need to do that now. It's not happening until here. What are your tips for when female leaders are getting to that point that they're just, like you said, you get to a certain point, don't you? And you're not as effective, you're not impactful, you don't have that presence because you're getting either stuck in your own head and overthinking, or you're kind of going into functioning mode, but actually you're trying to do so much that you're not really doing anything as well as you probably could do. So what are your tips for when you're getting to that point?
I think for me,
I think one, sorry.
Oh, sorry, carry on.
So British. There you go.
Oh dear. Yeah, I'll just carry on. One, and I think it actually goes hand in hand a bit with your mental vomit, Nick, is then challenging those assumptions. So kind of once you've got all those things that are in your head, get them out of your head first. It is so difficult to tackle things as they're swirling around in there. If you get them out of your head onto a piece of paper, onto the notes section on your phone, wherever works for you, get it out of your head, and then look at, okay, what is it that I'm actually assuming here that is keeping me in this state of overwhelm? So if it's something like, if I don't do all the work, then it's not going to be done right. Well, how true is that assumption? Is the world really going to fall apart if you delegate? Probably not. That's kind of your job now when you get into that leadership position to be able to delegate. You know, if I don't answer all the emails straight away, is everything going to come to a standstill? Well, no, it's not. So that would be one of my top tips. What are those things that you are assuming that is then keeping you in that state of overwhelm, and challenge that. See how true they actually are.
Absolutely. I love that. I just love that. And I do, you almost don't want to delegate because it's not going to be done in your way, but then it might be done in a different way or a better way, or it's actually, you know, someone can learn through that anyway, and you're not having to
absolutely
let go.
It takes it off your plate. It takes it off your plate.
Absolutely. What about you, Faye?
Well, it's interesting that Becky said that, because I was going to say exactly the same thing. For me, I don't tend to write things down. I tend to walk it out. So I think a lot.
Ooh, like
I'm a big thinker. So I'll go for a walk and have a think. And whilst I'm doing that, I might be listening to some music. Music always calms me down. That's my thing that I like.
Do you have a playlist?
I don't have a playlist. I've probably got bands that I tend to listen to more than others. But also as well, podcasts. I'm a big one for listening to a podcast, finding something that fits my mood, and then I'll go out and listen to that while I'm walking. But yeah, it's challenging. That's what I was going to really agree with Becky on, that challenging that thinking, because you know, we know as coaches, we know that what we're thinking isn't necessarily true. And we have to ask ourselves, is this true? You know, we can really, I'm an overthinker, so I know about this. I will overthink things and catastrophize in my head. Whereas actually, is this true? You know, is this going to be the catastrophe that I'm thinking it's going to be? And what do I need to do? What's one thing that I need to do to change that right now? What's one action that I can take to change it? You know, there are certain things we all do. We wake up in the morning, we've had a great night's sleep or a terrible night's sleep. We'll wake up in the middle of the night maybe, and we're thinking those catastrophes, those things that are going to go wrong. And it's time to switch that thinking and think, right, I'm going to make this go right. What do I need to do? What will I need to do to start my day?
Yeah, I know for me, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, another really great thing is getting out of my head and getting back into my own body and getting back into my skin. So similar to you, like you can just stick me in the ocean, like just get me swimming or get me just moving in some way, and that it gets me out of that almost paralysis by analysis of that, you know, overanalyzing, overthinking, and just I'm like back in my own skin, and then I'm a bit more objective and I can stand back a bit more. And I find the other thing that I really love as well is like when I'm going for a walk, I love that concept of moving, but also just having like a big view or something that puts everything in perspective when I'm kind of stuck in, oh, this hasn't worked, or I've not heard from this person, or I'm waiting for this, or feeling a bit stuck. It's like, do any of these things am I going to remember this tomorrow or next week or next month or next year? It's like, you know, just that perspective that when you're looking at something with such awe gives you. Yeah. And I love that question of, is it true? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, is it true? Is it true? Yeah. I think another big one for me as well, guys, is around resetting your boundaries. I think when we start to get into that state of overwhelm, the boundaries fall away, don't they? And that's when you might start working. You work all the hours, you skip your lunch breaks, you're leaving late, and I think lockdown has really brought that issue to the fore, because people have sort of been working all the time because you're working from home, and so they've not had those boundaries in place. And I think that resetting and know what is important. Actually, no, I'm not logging on before this time, or as soon as I turn my computer off. You and I have spoken about it before, Nick, about being off, on, and off. So when you're on it, you are on it and you're giving it your all. But that when you've put that boundary in place of this, at this point, I am not working, and that then you are off. So really getting clear on those boundaries.
Absolutely. And I think there's also a thing that I see so much in female leaders, especially, is almost that constant needing to prove, and that fear of letting go of control, and that fear of setting those boundaries, because you're not always going to be there. I was actually talking about this yesterday when I was recording my podcast, and just so we almost make ourselves invisible, ironically, because it's assumed that we'll always be there. And actually you lessen your impact because you're in all those conversations, you're in every meeting, and more than you probably need to be, and you're the first to answer the email, and you're so stuck in that kind of over-proving that the overwhelm is kind of constant. Whereas I love that, the resetting of boundaries, the on and off, and it's really down to all of us as female leaders to really role model our value and worth, because if we don't role model it, who else is going to see it? People aren't going to see it. They're going to see the opposite. If we're demonstrating that our time and love and energy and expertise isn't worth much, that's how people will treat us. So for me, it all kind of wraps into that time to stop the proving and really own your value and own your expertise, and do it in a different way, which is set those boundaries, be really clear on what your objectives are. How can you have the most impact with your expertise? And as part of that, you know, just stepping away from that constant overwhelm.
There's bravery that comes into this, isn't there? Because, you know, as I'm listening to you there, and I'm thinking, what's coming up in my head is like, is the mum who has to go because her child isn't very well at school, or she has to go and pick her children up because she's got no after school care. And it's those things that, whilst we accept we accept them on the one hand, they're not acceptable on the other in some certain organizations. You know, I've seen it and I know it happens. And especially if you're in a very male environment, you know, people know that you've got to go, but women do this to women as well. You know, even women who've got children, even women who are mums, you know, do this to other women. Oh, she's always going off at this time, or something like that. So there's an element of real bravery. You know, you can show up as who you are, for the fantastic person that you are. You can prove your potential. You can prove yourself. And then you've got to kind of stick with it and say, right, I'm going now because I'm keeping those boundaries firmly in place. It's not the easiest thing to do.
No, not at all. When I talk about boundaries, I talk about brave boundaries, because especially if for a period of time you've not been role modeling your value and worth, it's almost like a course correction to bring them back to where they always should have been. That people that have benefited from you not having those boundaries. So maybe if you're doing more work than you should do, or maybe if you're doing something quickly for someone because it's easy, or you're helping a peer with something, it's like, well, all of those things, like it's resetting. Those people have benefited from you not having those brave boundaries. So when you kind of reset them, there's going to be potentially a reaction, because that's where they all should have been.
Do you know, the other thing that's coming to mind with all this for me, Nick, is about the kind of environment and the culture that you then end up creating as well. You know, if you're a person who is leading a team and you are modeling that you live in this state of overwhelm, in this state of stress, in this state of doing all the things, which can lead to often micromanaging people as well. And that, you know, you work all the hours, and it can almost breed that expectation of, I'm then supposed to do this as well. I mean, I'm saying this because I definitely worked in a team where if you weren't overwhelmed and you weren't stressed, then you were almost like an outsider. You obviously weren't doing enough. If you weren't stressed, you weren't doing enough. Instead of looking at the people who weren't in that state of overwhelm and thinking, okay, they've got it right, they've got that balance, they're doing a great job, but they know when to turn the laptop off and go home. You know, you end up creating this culture where that's just the way it is, and but more worryingly, that's the way that it should be, and it shouldn't. That should never be the culture of your work environment.
I love that. Interestingly, I worked with the opposite. I had the manager, brilliant leader, and the best ever for me, who would come in 5 minutes before he was due to start work, and he would leave on time. He would not encourage us to be in before him, and he didn't encourage us to stay later than him. And he said that if we did, then he wasn't doing his job properly. So he used to go to the gym before coming into work in the morning. He had about an hour's journey to work. He recognized that the rest of us were probably a lot more local than he was, but he did not expect us to do any extra hours. And he said that, you know, if we were, then that was his problem, and he would sort it, because he did not expect it. Now, in the rest of the organisation,
love that,
didn't really work like that.
I wish I'd had a boss.
I want to work
there. He's amazing, and do you know what? He taught me so much, so much. But the rest of the organisation, the workers wanted to be on the team, and the managers hated him. They couldn't lead like he did. He was brilliant. Taught me so much. Yeah.
We've got just a couple of minutes left, ladies. So just tell us where people can find out more info about working for you. We've got some comments to have a look at this afternoon as well after we finish.
Go on, Becky. You go first.
Yeah. Okay. So you can find me on LinkedIn as Rebekah Whitaker, or my website, which I think, it'll be launched at the end of this week. Actually, the official launch of it, but it is sort of landing in the background now. questforest.co.uk. You can find me there and get in touch with me there. I'd love to hear from you.
Amazing. Thank you.
And for me, I'm on LinkedIn as Fay Blakey, and I'm fayblakey.com is my website. I'm also on Facebook, Fay Blakey Coaching, and I have a free Facebook group, which is for business owners and leaders. And that's called The Business Pod. The Business Pod. It's free, and you can come and hang out with me in there.
Love it.
Thanks, Nick.
I've loved hanging out with you today. I wish we could go on longer, but I'm sure we'll be doing a podcast together very soon. So
I think so.
Yeah. Right, ladies. Lots of love.
Like
Thank you today.
Thanks for having us, Nick.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
See you later.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.